In the middle of the 20th century, the most populous nation on earth stood at a crossroads. Its cities were scarred by years of war, its countryside locked in ancient rhythms of poverty, and its people, hundreds of millions of them, were hungry for change. That change would come under the banner of revolution, led by a man whose name would dominate modern Chinese history, Mao Zedong. To his supporters, he was a visionary determined to drag China into the modern age. To his critics, he was a reckless ideologue whose policies would cost tens of millions of lives. This is the story of how Mao rose to power, reshaped an ancient nation, and launched one of the most audacious and disastrous social experiments in human history. The Great Leap Forward. The year is 1949. From Tiananmen Square in Beijing, then often called Peking, Mao Zedong proclaims the birth of the People's Republic of China. The red flags wave, the crowd roars, and decades of revolutionary struggle finally seem to have paid off. Mao has spent much of his life in the trenches of revolution, organizing peasant uprisings in the 1920s, surviving the brutal Long March of the mid-1930s, where communist forces trekked thousands of miles to escape encirclement by the Nationalist Army, and fighting side by side with Chinese soldiers against Japanese occupation during World War II. By 1949, his Communist Party has defeated Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government. Chiang and his followers have fled to the island of Taiwan, vowing to one day retake the mainland. For Mao, this victory is more than political, it is personal. His vision for China is not just independence from foreign control, but the complete transformation of its economy, society, and culture. Mao's new government is not a democracy in any Western sense. Officially, it is a people's democratic dictatorship, a phrase that sounds contradictory because it is. Real power flows through the Chinese Communist Party. At the top sits the Central Committee, roughly 100 of the party's most senior figures. Above them, the Politburo, a smaller circle of leaders. And at the core, the Politburo Standing Committee, the highest authority in the land. Here we find Mao's closest allies and rivals. Liu Shaoqi, a skilled organizer who studied in Moscow, now vice-chairman. Zhou Enlai, an elegant, diplomatic revolutionary who will serve as China's first premier and foreign minister. And, of course, Mao himself, the undisputed paramount leader. Mao is 55 years old, confident, and untouchable politically. He is married to Jiang Qing, a former actress with sharp political instincts and fierce loyalty to her husband. Jiang will later play a controversial role in China's politics, but for now, Mao's focus is on reshaping the nation. In 1949, China is overwhelmingly rural. 4 out of every 5 people are peasants working small plots of land, often under the control of wealthy landlords. The first priority of Mao's government is land reform, a cornerstone of communist ideology. Landlords, long accused of exploiting peasants, are publicly denounced. Many are put on trial in mass meetings that resemble political theater more than justice. The verdict is often death. By some estimates, over 1 million landlords are executed during this campaign. Their land is seized and distributed to poorer peasants. Roughly 300 million people receive land for the first time. But land reform is only the beginning. Mao's government introduces sweeping laws to improve women's rights, banning arranged marriages and promoting equality in the workplace. Literacy campaigns sweep the countryside, introducing simplified Chinese characters to make reading easier for the masses. The propaganda machine goes into overdrive. Posters, plays, and storytelling events all hammer home the values of revolution and loyalty to the party. Internationally, Mao's China is born into a tense new world order, the Cold War. The United States and its allies view Communist China as an extension of Soviet power, while the Soviet Union sees China as a crucial partner in the global socialist movement. In December 1949, Mao travels to Moscow to meet Joseph Stalin. The relationship is uneasy. Mao resents Soviet interference in Chinese affairs, but both sides see the value of cooperation. In 1950, they sign a treaty of friendship, alliance, and mutual assistance, paving the way for Soviet economic aid and military training. Meanwhile, Mao moves to secure China's borders. Xinjiang in the northwest is brought back under firm Chinese control. In 1951, Tibet is invaded and annexed after brief fighting, with Beijing calling it the peaceful liberation of Tibet. The defining international crisis of Mao's early rule comes in 1950. Across the Yellow Sea, the Korean peninsula erupts in war as communist North Korea invades the south. When United Nations forces, led by the United States, push the North Korean army to the Yalu River, right on China's border, Mao decides to act. In October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese People's Volunteers cross into Korea. The fighting is brutal. Chinese forces, often poorly equipped but fiercely determined, push UN troops back into South Korea. By mid-1951, the war is a stalemate along the 38th parallel. An armistice is signed in 1953, but at a heavy cost. An estimated 500,000 Chinese soldiers are dead or wounded. Mao's own son, Mao Zedong, is killed in an airstrike. Despite the losses, Mao presents the war as a victory, proof that China can stand up to a superpower. But the US responds with a full trade embargo, further isolating China from the Western world. With Soviet advisors and industrial blueprints in hand, Mao launches China's first five-year plan in 1953. The goals are clear. Boost industrial output, steel, coal, machinery. Modernize agriculture through collectivization. The results are mixed. Heavy industry soars, but agriculture lags behind. Farmers are pushed into cooperatives where land, tools, and harvests are shared. By 1956, 80% of rural households are in collectives. This isn't just about farming, it's about control. Collectivization ties rural communities more tightly to the party's will, eroding traditional village autonomy. In 1956, Mao calls for 100 flowers to bloom, 100 schools of thought to contend. Intellectuals take him at his word, openly criticizing party inefficiency and corruption. But Mao quickly changes course. In 1957, he launches the Anti-Rightist campaign, targeting anyone seen as disloyal. Hundreds of thousands are humiliated, imprisoned, or sent to labor camps. The message is clear: political dissent will not be tolerated. By 1958, Mao is ready for his boldest gamble yet, the Great Leap Forward. The plan is breathtaking in scale. Merge collectives into vast people's communes. Industrialize the countryside with backyard steel furnaces. Boost grain output through radical farming methods. Communal kitchens replace private ones, eating alone is branded selfish. Local officials, desperate to please the central government, inflate production numbers. The state takes grain based on these false reports, leaving rural areas short of food. Nature adds to the disaster, floods and droughts hit hard. But the main cause is policy, unrealistic targets, mismanagement, and fear of reporting bad news. The result is catastrophic famine. Modern estimates suggest at least 45 million deaths between 1959 and 1962, making it the deadliest man-made famine in history. At the 1959 Lushan Conference, Defense Minister Peng Dehuai openly criticizes the Great Leap Forward. Mao retaliates, removing Peng from office and replacing him with loyalist Lin Biao. But the famine cannot be hidden forever. By 1961, more pragmatic leaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping begin rolling back the communes, restoring some private farming, and dismantling communal kitchens. Mao steps back from day-to-day governance, but remains party chairman, watching carefully for an opportunity to reassert his dominance. While famine ravages China, relations with the Soviet Union collapse. Mao is outraged by Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin and pursuit of peaceful coexistence with the West. By 1960, Soviet advisors withdraw from China, halting joint projects. The two nations, once partners, are now bitter ideological rivals. In 1962, China fights a brief war with India over Himalayan border disputes, winning militarily but worsening its international image. Determined to show independence from both superpowers, China develops its own nuclear weapons. In 1964, it detonates its first atomic bomb at Lop Nor, followed by a hydrogen bomb in 1967. China has entered the nuclear club, a signal that it is now a global power, whether the world likes it or not. By the mid-1960s, China has endured revolution, war, famine, and international isolation. Mao's prestige has been dented but not destroyed. A new struggle is brewing, not against foreign powers, but within China itself. The stage is set for the Cultural Revolution, a political storm that will once again shake the nation to its core. The Great Leap Forward was meant to catapult China into prosperity. Instead, it became a cautionary tale of how ideology, unchecked power, and the silencing of dissent can turn dreams into disasters. For Mao Zedong, it was not the end of his story, but it would remain a shadow over everything that followed.